It is a summer night, 25 centuries ago. You are lying on the ground in a war camp in Greece. Tomorrow, or the day after, or maybe next week, there will be a battle. Nobody will tell you when. Nobody actually knows. The movies lie to you about this part. They show the march, then the speech, then the charge. They skip the part that filled most of a soldier's life. The waiting. Days of it, sometimes weeks. And what soldiers actually did while they waited is a stranger story than the battle itself. Start with your hands. In a war camp, your hands are never empty. An army of 20,000 men carries roughly 20,000 spears. Every bronze edge dulls, every strap frays, every single day. So you sit in the dirt with a whetstone and you grind, stroke after stroke after stroke. Your armor is worse. Leather stiffens and cracks in the sun. Linen soaks up sweat and starts to rot. So you rub everything with oil and animal fat again and again, because a strap that snaps tomorrow can kill you. This is the first truth of ancient war. Before it is ever a fight, it is a job. A boring, endless, repetitive job. But the boredom hides a monster. And I want you to see it clearly. 20,000 men, plus their horses and mules and oxen, produce tons of waste every single day. If any of it reaches the drinking water, the army starts dying before the enemy even shows up. So the first weapons drawn in any campaign are not swords, they are shovels. You dig the latrine trenches downhill and downstream. You haul clean water from upstream, every camp, every time. The Romans took this to an extreme. Every single night on the march, a legion dug a complete fortified camp, ditch, rampart, palisade, even if it was leaving the next morning. Because the deadliest siege was never the one outside the walls. It was the invisible one, inside the camp. Then the sun goes down, the chores run out, and the real enemy shows up. Your own mind. Remember, you are probably a farmer. You have seen one battle in your life, maybe none, and your imagination will not shut up. So soldiers reached for the oldest painkiller in the world, games. Knucklebones and dice have been dug out of army camps from Egypt to Persia, carved from sheep bone, worn smooth by nervous thumbs. Roman commanders kept trying to rein the gambling in. They kept failing, because for the length of one throw, the only thing at stake is the game. Meanwhile, the camp is quietly becoming a city, and every city invents an economy. Your pay is grain, oil, and sour wine. It is boring, but it is yours, and that makes it money. Men traded rations for better sandals, wine for a sharper knife, bread for a warm spot by the fire. Veterans sat at the top of this economy, not because of muscle, because of information. They knew which merchant watered the wine, which strap snapped, and which corner of the camp flooded in the rain. A green recruit paid for that knowledge, in bread, in favors, in respect. And behind every army trailed a second army, merchants, cooks, smiths, fortune tellers, selling everything a frightened man might buy. At the fires each night, strangers were being welded into brothers. The welding torch was laughter. Soldier humor was pitch black then, for the same reason it is pitch black now. It is very hard to stay terrified of something you have just laughed at. Old soldiers told stories, half true, half Polish, absurd officers, impossible escapes, and every story carried the same secret message. Someone once stood exactly where you are standing and lived. By the time the battle came, you were not fighting beside strangers anymore. And that, more than any tactic, is what held a line together. But under the jokes and the dice, one question sat on every chest like a stone. What happens tomorrow? And for that question, the ancient world had a technology. The gods. Before a Greek army moved, priests sacrificed an animal at the altar and opened it up. A seer read the entrails. Above all, the liver. Smooth and healthy? The gods say yes. Blemished, spotted, strange? The gods say no. Now, you can call that superstition, but watch what it actually does. In a world with no forecasts and no certainty of any kind, the ritual manufactures the one thing an army runs on: confidence. A man who believes heaven has signed off grips his spear very differently. Sometimes the omens took an entire war hostage. Herodotus tells the story. 479 BC, Plataea. A huge Greek army and a huge Persian army face each other across a small stream. Both sides sacrifice, and both sides get the same answer. Stay where you are and the signs are good. Attack first and the gods promise disaster. So for more than a week, two of the biggest armies of the ancient world just stood there, staring. Tens of thousands of armed men held in place by the liver of a sheep. When the Persian cavalry finally attacked, the Spartan commander Pausanias sacrificed again and again while arrows were already falling. His men crouched behind their shields, taking hits, waiting for heaven to change its mind. Then the sacrifice came back clean. The Spartans stood up, and the Persian line broke. That is how seriously the ancient world took a yes from heaven. Now for the part no statue ever shows. The deadliest thing in that camp was not the enemy. It was the camp itself. Pack thousands of men and animals into one field for weeks, and you have built a machine for making disease. Dysentery, typhoid, fevers with no name. The men just called it camp fever. For most of military history, right up into the 19th century, disease killed more soldiers than combat did. And the math is brutal. A sword has to find you. Bad water finds everyone. So those unglamorous latrine trenches from earlier, they were the sharpest weapon in the entire camp. The officers, meanwhile, feared one more enemy: idle time itself. A bored soldier gambles away his cloak. A frightened soldier slips into the dark and starts walking home. The cure for both was sweat. Form the line, wheel left, lock shields, again and again, until your arms shake and your mind is finally, mercifully, empty. Not because the men forgot how to fight, because exhausted men sleep instead of thinking. And through all of it, we should be honest, there was the smell. Thousands of unwashed bodies, dung heaps, blood from the morning sacrifices, smoke from 100 fires, oil, leather, sweat. Veterans claimed you could smell an army long before you could see it. The wind carried the camp for miles. And then, one morning, everything changes. The scouts ride in fast. The morning sacrifice finally comes back clean. Officers walk the tent lines, speaking one quiet word: today. And the strangest thing happens to the camp. It goes calm. The dice vanish. The jokes stop. Nobody has to order the silence. You eat a little because the veterans insist on it. You drink. You check your feet like your life depends on them, because it does. Then the men begin dressing each other. You cannot lace your own armor properly. Nobody can. So your neighbor pulls your straps tight, and then you pull his. It is oddly tender. Thousands of killers buckling each other in, like parents dressing children for winter. Quiet messages pass down the line. If I do not come back, tell my wife, tell my mother, tell my son. You memorize a stranger's last words to his family, and he memorizes yours. Then the line forms, shield touches shield, and the whole plain goes silent. Out in front, a priest kills one last animal as the enemy walks toward you. The final question, asked at the final moment. And you stand in that silence with everything the waiting made. The whetstone hours, the dice, the jokes, the prayers, the man beside you whose mother now lives in your memory. Then the horn. We remember battles as moments, an afternoon, a name, marathon, Plataea, canny. But for the men inside them, war was mostly this: weeks of digging, grinding, betting, and praying, trying to stay human in the waiting room of death. The fighting took an hour, the waiting took the season. And every trick they used, the games, the jokes, the rituals, the brotherhood, still shows up in every barracks and every waiting room on Earth. 25 centuries later, we still wait the same way. Because courage was never the absence of fear. Courage is the thing people build together while they wait.